welcome to another edition of the Solo Sessions podcast. I'm your host, Ben Canute, and we are back here in Colorado right after Ironman Arizona. Big 2.5 week trip for the family. And in this episode, I'm going to run through a lot of what was going through my mind in Ironman Arizona. I'll give you kind of the play-by-play of the swim, bike, run, some of the battles I went through, people that I noticed in and around me, how the race dynamics were panning out. I think in this race in particular, you had some Instagram updates, but there wasn't any live feed. And even if there was a live feed, I think sometimes you miss some of those racing dynamics and decisions. So I've done this for at least one half Ironman. I want to try and give you as much detail as possible going into all of this, kind of what I was thinking about pre-race and how I wanted to execute it, and then how it all ended up panning out. So I guess we'll just dive right in to the very beginning of a rough plan of my sort of expectations and what I wanted to do, and then we'll kind of just go through the morning and going in. So the podcast beforehand gave you a bit of how I was feeling. Maybe sometimes I play a little bit coy or maybe hide a little bit in those episodes right beforehand. I don't know if any of my competitors really listen to this podcast, but you always try and keep a little bit of an edge on everybody, I think, when you're going into a race that you're trying to win. My reach goal for this, or I guess my main goal, is I wanted to be better than I was back at my debut 3 years ago. Technology's progressed. I've done, the training for this wasn't necessarily specific. My main specific training was for 70.3 Worlds in Marbella, and this was just a good roll in, so I didn't have to extend training to go to Cozumel, didn't have to travel all the way to Western Australia for that Ironman, and I really just wanted one more Ironman under my belt to execute well and really show that Ironman Arizona on my debut and Challenge Roth, I can execute at that super high level. So my times from the previous Ironman were, and these are going to be a little rough. They're not exact. I don't have them pulled up right here, but they were like 47:30, about a 4:12 on the bike. And then the marathon was about a 2:45 right there. And the dynamics of that race where I swam at the front with Andrew Holfsard Turner. I totally butchered that name. But then we rode a bit, but Joe Skipper and Christian Hogenhag dropped me on that first lap of the bike on the downhill, pushed watts well above Ironman, and I just wanted to be steady. So I rode that ride mostly solo, and then I just ran a real steady marathon overall. Definitely suffered at the end, had a good little battle with Christian Hogenhag around mile 22-ish, along with Matt Hansen coming up on me from about 10 minutes down. That all, in the past, different race dynamics, different weather, a slightly different lead out on the bike course. The bike course had a much smoother section of pavement this time around, which probably did help with a little bit faster bike speeds through a certain section. But the bulk of the course was the same with the out and back on the bike on the Beeline Highway. And then the marathon, the slight change was, which I think it was actually a slightly slower course, at least because instead of doing a couple very long out and backs on bike paths that, there was a little bit of dirt on, they shortened those out and backs to make sure that we could do 3 loops of the course, better for spectators, more engaging for the athletes, but also it added in some extra hills. And this is a deceivingly hard run course. It's not super fast overall. So I went 7:51 at that race, and I wanted to at least beat that. I figured I figured sub 7:30 this year was possible. And as we get into it, you'll see that it was. But that was kind of a reach goal for me, knowing with who was in the race. With Menno Koolhaas, we had quite a few different swimmers, a good set of cyclists who were going to be out there. And we wanted to keep a gap to some of these other guys who had the potential to run super fast. So my main goal was trying to be at the front as long as possible and set myself up for a good second half of the marathon to try and play for the win if I could. And that all really started with a quick swim. So to get to the morning of, we weren't too far away. Fun little, tidbit was we stayed about 10-15 minutes north of Tempe, just right kind of near Old Town Scottsdale, if you know the area. But there was another endurance event going on, a marathon up there, which made getting to and from the race site at the early hours, not too tricky, but definitely went around a cone here or there to get to the start for Ironman Arizona. And from there, I have a lot of history in that Tempe area. I've raced there in college and a few races in between. And so it just felt very familiar. I lived in Phoenix for 7 years, if not a little bit more. So the smells, the morning, the sunrise, well, I guess the dark at that time of day before the start was all very familiar and felt just kind of right to be there on the start line. My body in the morning waking up was also really pretty good. I would say some of the pre-race nerves and how I was feeling, I wouldn't say I was jumping out of my skin like super fresh, but I knew that I just needed to get into the day and start being consistent, because I guess the main difference between Ironman and 70.3 right now is the amount of times you're probably crossing over threshold is very minimized. So while maybe I was a bit more dull or not as sharp on the very high end, I knew from the days leading in that my body bounced back pretty quickly and that I'd be good over a long period of time. Now, how full was the tank? Was I carrying any fatigue from Marbella and from the travel internationally? That all kind of is up in the air, and I don't know if I could really say that. I'd say as I got into the race, probably it was not the lead in that I would have 100% wanted if I was just fully targeting Ironman Arizona. But this just kind of fit in well on the way home. It was a good little challenge, and it just seemed like the right way to end the season for me. So after going through all of the warm-up, going through everything, I had my dad at the start line. The rest of the family was at home sleeping in a little bit, because you don't see people for very long after the swim when you go out on the bike, despite it being a 3-loop bike course. I just got to the start. I started to get real excited for the start. It's in water. The water this year was not super cold, and we avoided any drama with the swim because the rain that was forecasted ended up not really showing up. We had a few sprinkles, but not enough for them to require a water quality test, which would have canceled the swim, which was fantastic because I think that would have been pretty deflating. In the back of my mind, I was really preparing myself a little bit and wanted to make sure that if that's the case of how the race was going to go, I was still going to execute, as I have done that before at much shorter distances. But when you show up and you want to race an Ironman, you want the swim. And that's what everybody on the start line wanted, because it's the last showing of Ironman Arizona, and you just want it to go off on a good note, which it did. And I got to say, we really got to figure out a better way to start races in water, because we all creep forward. And it's really hard because depending on where the starter is and where that buoy out in the water is situated, it could look like some people are further ahead or back, and it's just not really easy. And unless you're in Kona with the paddle boarders that are going back and forth to keep you in line, there's just inevitable creeping forwards. So before the start, I found myself next to Menno Koolhaas and Andreas Salvesberg. I wasn't exactly sure where he was, but there was a little bit of talk before the race where, hey, we'll share the work. Maybe we didn't specify who would be first or anything, but we all knew that we were some of the faster swimmers in the race and wanted to make sure that the pace was fast enough to distance ourselves from people like Sam Long, Matt Hansen, Trevor Foley, Rasmus Svenningsson, just guys who are either going to tear up the bike or tear up the run. And Sam Long actually started right near us as well. I did my pre-race talk to everybody like, hey, let's not fight. It's a long day. It's an Ironman. Like, let's just get out clean, because I wanted to get fresh water right at the start. And the swim was much better. I swam in actually the DeBoer 1.0, which is one of my favorite wetsuits ever. I changed it up just to, try a little something different from Marbella. And I have kind of this arsenal of DeBoer wetsuits, and am lucky to be able to pick kind of which one that I want to wear. So I felt like this one, for this water temp and how I was swimming and everything, just was going to suit me a little bit better. So just decided to go with that. And as the gun went off, I got out fairly well. But when you start next to a fast swimmer like Menno, we both know we can get out fairly well. We're both gauging our effort because it's an Ironman, and you don't want to go anaerobic that early if you can help it. And we were kind of swimming side by side, so I kind of let him take the lead a little bit first. And there were a few other guys who are also going as well. And I'm probably going to refrain from naming any other names because it's just hard to recognize people. I have an idea of who was around me and looking at, different caps, wetsuits, that sort of thing. You can kind of figure it out, especially in an Ironman swim where you're not fully out of it. It feels like a long endurance effort. And so that's kind of starting to say in a long roundabout way is that Menno was up front, and I'm fairly confident it was him just because I started right next to him and tried to slot in right behind him to just take a little bit of a break and figured it looks like he's trying to go maybe a bit early on and I can take over for him in a little while. And it looked like somebody else swam up right next to him. And the pace ended up not being super hot for that first few hundred meters. And I could tell we had a lot of people with us just looking around. And it was really pretty frustrating because I was very cruisy behind these front two swimmers. And you kind of bang into the person next to you when there's two swimmers swimming side by side. But the most frustrating part is that I know when you're swimming side by side like that, you're slowing each other down. So this is a PSA to all of the fast swimmers who want to be at the front of the race. Make a decision. Either go to the front and put in the extra effort and go and slot yourself in first if you want to lead the swim, or drop back a little bit off of that front first swimmer so that we could actually string out the swim. And as I'm seeing this unfold, this is all within the first 300 to 500 meters as I'm thinking. I'm going through some different scenarios because in my mind, if we aren't swimming fast enough to string it out, then you get guys who latch onto the back of the pack. And in talking with Matt Hansen, he also had just snagged that one of the last slots, I think, in that first half of the swim. And I knew between Long, Foley, you got Zach Cooper in there, Rasmus Fenningsson, like they had a lot of firepower on the bike. And they aren't traditionally the strongest swimmers. So if we could get 3, 4, 5+ minutes on them, that's a lot of momentum for us on the front, and it's a long day of chasing for them from behind. And on this course with high speeds, the amount of power you have to push to overcome that gap is pretty significant. And it wasn't planned to be like this super windy day or anything. So the kind of, I guess, strategy or the dynamics could potentially weigh in our favor if we could have a really fast swim. So as we get a few hundred meters in, I'm thinking to myself, like, this is just not great. I kind of moved to the side, and we're also swimming back and forth all around. I wasn't sure if it was because the leaders couldn't see where the buoys were because it was dark when we started. Ironman always seems to start right at first light, and with this swim, you're going to swim into the sun at the beginning, but there were clouds because of that forecasted rain, and so it stayed darker longer. So we didn't have the sun in our face. However, seeing yellow buoys and following the stand-up paddleboarder if they're a little bit farther ahead is a little bit more confusing. And we pretty much, though, swim along a wall and have a little bit of distance from it. So you can kind of tell where you're going. But it just was weird because the two swimmers were like side by side, and then they'd go out and then they'd come back together. And I didn't really know what was going on. I'm like, nobody wants to take charge. So I'll take it upon myself because my whole plan, like I said, was to put myself in a position to try for the win later on in the race. And part of that is getting the swim to go. And I have been swimming super well, so I knew I'd have the energy to kind of do this early on. And instead of taking the swim a lot later and then dropping, or like sitting in and then taking the swim fast later, I'm like, okay, I'll flip-flop. I'll take the lead now, string this out a little bit, and then at the halfway point past those far two buoys, I'll pull off and let somebody else take the lead. So I did. I cut right in between the two swimmers after sitting in between their 2 feet. That is the most energy efficient way of swimming, is between two swimmers. You don't get to do it very often when you're at the front because, one, it's inefficient for those two swimmers to swim side by side. It's usually strung out. And if you're in a big group, then sometimes you just find yourself there. But I kind of swam and cut between them and tried to put in a decent effort. And then I realized what the problem was is that I think at the time, if it was Menno in front of me, he would try and put in a surge, but this other person swimming next to him would kind of surge and then swim up next to him again. And he started doing that with me. And so I pulled off to the left and put in a good surge, and he'd kind of sit on my hip and try and pull up. So it took like just a couple of small surges to figure out what was going on. I actually, in the middle of the swim, yelled at him. I'm like, go forward or back, and it was very broken. So it just probably sounded like a, ah, and he at one point kind of like looked up, looked around, because I bet you he thought I was saying, you're going the wrong way, or we're going the wrong way, or that's probably what was first in his mind instead of this. So maybe they just didn't realize, because this is a lot of like an ITU type thing too, where when you really want to swim fast, you got to do a single file, you string it out, break it up, all of that sort of thing. It's not as practiced, I guess, in Ironman until probably fairly recently, especially with the Nice race at the World Championships with those guys in the WhatsApp group. So kind of confused him a little bit, I think, for a moment. And then I tried to take off, and I put in a decent effort and just swam, not really thresholdy, but just a little under to try and put in a good effort, string it out. And then I pulled, the buoy tactics, where went into the buoy and tried to take it a hard corner and kind of S around, make people follow the feet and have some gaps open up, and did that around the far two turn buoys, and was able to do a little bit of damage, I think, because again, in talking with Matt Hansen, he said that halfway point is about where he got popped. And that was kind of my strategy, like, okay, let's shed some people. And after turning that far turn buoy, so we have the long straight all the way back, I took a few backstroke turns, let some other people go, made it very clear that I'm done leading. You guys take some responsibility now, and tried to slot in relatively high up. But of course, when people are high up in the group, you have to fight a little bit to get on their feet. And after nudging people over, feeling like I probably deserved that spot because I just helped string out this group, nobody really let me in. That's fair. That's racing. So I dropped to the back of that and did a little mental count of how many people there were, looked between 7 and 12 guys coming out like in this group, and basically sat on the back of that group for a while and just kind of was going. I used a pair of goggles that I've raced in quite a bit. They ended up being a little bit leaky, so I got that Tempe Town lake water leaking into my left goggle. So I was emptying that out a little bit as I swam and just trying to make sure, okay, are we going the right way? Is there any gaps opening? And just really tried to recover from any effort I put in at the beginning of the swim to make sure I'm ready for the bike. Those swims always seem to take a while, but this one went by really pretty quick. I felt really in control and kind of figured, I think I saw the De Boer colors, and Menno did say afterwards he was leading that swim. And I think it was him, Salvesberg was on his feet, and then, there were a bunch of guys, and I kind of was just sitting in there. But as we came back, you swim under the Mill Ave bridge there before you take a left-hand turn to go in. I started to creep up the group and then just put in another little effort and was able to jump pretty quick up to about the third spot to go around the final little turn buoy before about maybe 150 meters into the swim exit. And did it, I thought in my back of my mind, I'm like, this would be pretty funny if I went and took the first out of the water after, leading the first half, sitting in the back, and then Menno doing the work on the back half. But wasn't going to stress myself out by trying to grab that because, as we all know, Ironman is a long day, and I got myself right in the position where I wanted, which is with a few of the guys who I thought would be players at the front of the race, basically Menno, Salvesberg, and myself. Going through transition, that left leaky goggle, you gotta get a freshy pair of goggles as much as you can before races. That was my bad on that part. A little foggy in that left eye, couldn't quite see, and then had some sort of bug or something fly in the right eye for a second there because it started stinging. Also couldn't really see, so I'm running half blind through the transition area, yelling out my number for my helmet as I get into the change tent, like take it out, make sure the visor's on, start trying to shove the wetsuit in there as much as possible as I'm running and kind of clip the helmet in. So just stayed very calm through it, but it was kind of chaotic through there. I saw Menno taking off, had Salvesberg around me, and then there were a few other guys. Like I noticed that there's a decent sized group and was just like, okay, this is actually not bad. If some of these guys want to kind of go berserk at the beginning or whatever, this is fine. We'll have a pretty decent sized group. Well, at that first loop, I believe it was Andreas Salvesberg, I want to say, who really started putting the hammer down at first. Menno kind of settled in. I got onto his wheel, and we kind of made our way through town out to the main road, the main highway. And we had a gap on actually the guys behind us. And it was, I believe, like Tom Davis, Matt McElroy, and Josh Lewis, I want to say. Maybe a couple other guys were on there as well at the beginning. And unbeknownst to me at the time, it seems like the officials were pretty liberal with penalties. I hope that, some of them sounded more BS than others. I can't really talk on any of it because I didn't see anybody get a penalty or what any of the drafting was like going on. But I know that's a pretty frustrating thing to have happen, especially so early on in an Ironman. And that probably, I don't know. I think that officials need to work well with the athletes, especially in a race without race ranger. But if anybody was going to get a penalty, it could probably only happen in that first lap, aside from something egregious happening in the second and third with the amount of age groupers that ended up on the course and just safety stuff. So I've known that the guys that I rode with, Salvesberg and Menno and Josh Lewis, like for a majority of the ride, those guys were all super fair. So I hope that, no unjust penalties were given, but obviously I can't make that call without seeing it. The reason why I talk about it a little bit is because with those guys who were there, I believe it was Tom Davis who ended up having one. And we rode that whole way out with Salvesberg and Menno leading, kind of trading off a little bit as I was kind of looking around seeing what was going to happen. And Tom Davis passed me right before the U-turn. And then the gap kind of started to open up, and there's an aid station there. And I don't think I grabbed anything actually at the beginning. Maybe I did a quick little grab, but he had let that gap open, and I kind of was like, don't let the gap open. Like, he just passed me, go through. But I didn't realize he was pulling into the penalty tent, and I was like, what, he has a penalty? Like, dang, like that's just poor timing on my part for him to pass me, go around and go in, because he's just trying to serve it as fast as possible to try and hop back on. But that created a bit of a gap between myself and Menno and Salvesberg, and I had to put in a pretty good effort. That was actually my highest 1 minute power from the race, and I believe it was in the mid 400s to be able to do that. And that's a pretty quick section as well because it's slight downhill. Now, on this course, on the way out, we did have a slight tailwind with the climb. And on the way back, you go down the climb, and so you have a slight headwind. So that kind of changed a little bit. The downhill, if the person on the front isn't pushing as hard, maybe the wind slows them down. You can kind of bridge that a little bit. But one thing it did do is probably help keep the speeds relatively high overall. And let's just see, my main 1 minute, it was 4:48. So right smack dab in the middle of the 400s. And that was kind of the biggest effort I had to put into the race. And that's actually, it's funny that happened right there because that's right where it happened with Christian Hogenhagen and Joe Skipper the 3 years prior. So I wasn't going to make that mistake again. I knew Menno was probably one of the favorites for the race with how he's been racing in T100. And just having raced him before, I know he's super strong. He was fifth in Kona last year. So he was definitely going to be somebody that you want to be around. And he rode super strong all day. But with Tom taking that penalty, Matt McElroy sitting behind him, and I believe Josh Lewis was too, I was able to hop up to that next group, as was Josh, if I was not behind him. I forget exactly. I know there are at least, Menno, Salvesberg, and then I had to bridge that gap, and Josh was either behind me or with me. But then Matt McElroy got popped there, and I don't know. I know his saddle broke as well, so I don't know exactly when that was. But kind of in that chaos of all the surging, our front group that had, 6, 7, maybe 8 guys, because I didn't really take that close of a look for how many were there at the turnaround, ended up blowing up a little bit, and it just ended up being Menno Koolhaas, Andreas Salvesberg, myself, and Josh Lewis for a majority that was just left at this bike, with Tom getting the penalty, Matt McElroy either having the mechanical or kind of dropping off that pack. And then after that, we had 4 minutes on Sam Long and his group. And behind that, I think, was Trevor Foley, and Zach Cooper rode up to those groups eventually, I think. And Colin Suk was in there as well. And Matt Hansen somewhere in there. Zach Cooper, I think, was kind of like that last guy to ride up to that group. Another little fun fact, I've talked maybe about Doug Freeman a little bit, but old school triathlete, been around for a long time, loves the sport, trained with him when I was back in Tucson. But on that first out on the bike, I'm just riding kind of head down, and all of a sudden this big tall guy on the bridge just yells, "Damn Long is 4 minutes back out of the water." And I first kind of thought was like, that's some good info. But then it quickly switched to, oh man, that's Doug fucking Freeman. Like, I love that guy. Like, he always just pops up out of nowhere. Last time I saw him, I think, was probably in a very similar spot out on the bike course back in 2022 on the bike course at Ironman Arizona, giving me splits as well. So that was just kind of fun to see him out there. And as we got on and back through that first lap, we saw we were holding time. The 180s really help with timekeeping. It's hard for, I think, people to give too accurate of splits because the timing mats might be a bit delayed. But we all got pretty motivated at that point because we were holding our gap. And that second lap, I started to take more responsibility in the group. I did a little bit of pulling, I think, at the end of that first lap or somewhere in there. And then also that second lap, I really started to take some pulls as well. And especially on the climbs on the way, on each part of those laps. Like, I knew training for Marbella, I was going to be well suited for those climbs, and that was a great place to put out power where maybe you're not getting a tailwind or into the headwind where like there's more of a draft effect at 12 meters. When I put out that power, everybody else was going to have to put out that power. And we all kind of communicated fairly well. I noticed Salvesberg was putting in some efforts, but Menno was really kind of on it with the time gaps everywhere. And at the end of that, on that final out, like, so the halfway point of the bike, we got told that second group is starting to catch up. And so I started to like look around. Josh, I guess, was a little bit cooked at this point. He said he cashed most of his chips kind of because I dropped back, tried to get him to work a bit. And Salvesberg and Menno were a little bit like, that was kind of the talk of the group at some points where it was like, Josh is just sitting there. He's a good athlete. Like, he needs to do some work. But, some days at Ironman, you just don't have all of your stuff. And from his posts, it seems like that was the case. He was just a bit empty. So that second loop, we started kind of like looking at each other a bit. And I could tell that group was starting to come up a little. And so I started trying chatter to those guys. Like, we got to keep working together. We still got another 2 hours of riding. We can't be playing games like right now, like cat and mouse. Because if we let all these guys back in, they have the momentum. They're going to run well. And we could go from, taking the podium potentially here to, finishing 4th through 6th for some reason. Like, if you let everybody back into the race, you don't want to give up a 4-minute gap in an Ironman if you can help it in any race, really, especially where a marathon is so unpredictable. So going through all that, like the end of the second lap was where I think it kind of peaked, where the guys were looking around and we had let up a little bit. The pace was not as hard. I was starting to get a little antsy because I've been in situations before where you sit around too much, look at each other, and the whole pack comes back in. So made sure to like keep the pace high. Like at that second turnaround, end of the second lap, we had people on board saying it was 3:40 to the group behind. I only half trust what people give because, like I said, they're just getting it from the tracker. Tracker might be delayed, and if these guys are pushing, we might end up losing extra time depending on where that was. So I did the turn, kind of lapped the computer, whatever, did the quick math. Felt like we only had 3 minutes. I did not go back and check that, but this is just how I'm playing it out in my mind as I'm going through. If we only had 3 minutes, they took a minute out then essentially in basically a half lap. You do that for another 2 laps. They're down to like a minute coming off the bike. I'm like, that can't happen because a minute is nothing in a marathon. And all these guys, like, we got to make them actually work if they're going to catch us. So I try and go pretty quickly to the front. I tell Menno, we only got 3 minutes. He's like, we got 3:40 on the board. I'm like, that's wrong. Like, we got to go. We got to work. And Salvesberg, I tell him kind of the same thing. I go to the front to push a little bit. and kind of circle like, hey guys, like we got to keep pushing. Menno was doing that kind of the whole ride too. And then he goes to the front and puts in a solid, strong effort where I'm like, ooh, okay, Menno means business right now. We're getting to the nitty gritty of the Ironman. We're probably, 80, 90 miles in. I'm like, this is where it all happens. This is what I've been waiting for the whole day. I've kind of been saying to myself, it's the second half of every single event, even though I flip-flop that in the swim. But like, this is the do or die type moment. And I start looking around and I look back and Salvesberg and Lewis are gone. I'm like, oh, okay, well, it's just me and Menno now. The back's starting to hurt. The hips are tightening up. I go up and down through this where I'm like, I'm feeling really good at times and get into my rhythm. And then other times, like I'm feeling really pretty terrible and going like, man, that race in Marbella, if I just only focused on this, maybe I'd be feeling a bit better. But I just kept focused and was like, okay, don't let Menno go. Because this is your take. Like if you lose a lot of momentum when somebody pulls away from you. Been there before, not going to let that happen. So we started trading off going well. And I guess I should go back and say too, nutrition strategy all the way before was really good. Don't take anything on the swim. And then on the bike, I rolled through it really pretty well for the first 2 hours, rolled through it. But the hardest part was Arizona roads there are just awful and bumpy. There was maybe one section where you could fill up bottles, but I like to toss some bottles at the aid station to just get rid of it, not have to fumble around by putting it back in behind me or anything. And just sometimes it's cleaner that way. So I would try and fill up and I'd just have my nutrition explode all over me in the bike. There's a good picture out there that I might post that just shows this struggle that I was going through. And so it's hard to say exactly how many grams of carbs I was getting. For the first half of the bike, I was going like 125 grams an hour, basically, through about an hour and a half, 2 hours. Then it definitely started to taper off. And I knew from the splashing out of that, I'm not getting in maybe as much. I had 450 grams of the Good Life Nutrition on my bike in 4 bottles, 2 with 125 and some caffeine, and then 2 with 100 without any caffeine. And I made it through about 3.5 of those bottles. Plus, you got to take into account stress, splash factor. As that effort gets harder, like at the beginning of the bike, it was not super intense. It's not a world championship level where you're hammering super hard right out of transition at like almost 400 watts. It's nothing like Marbella. It was much more controlled, even though it was a higher effort than you want for the Ironman. Like I was probably pushing about 330 to 350. It's like closer to 350 probably through the first little bit just to establish the group. For those first couple laps, I was seeing an average of about 315, 310, and it kind of settled as we got along, more like 300 watts for the ride. But I'm doing the math in my head because I'm making sure I want to get in. Bare minimum is kind of that 80 grams an hour, which is 320 grams of carbs for a 4-hour bike. And I know that I'm pretty close. But also, when you start pushing hard and you go longer in, I just find like it's harder to kind of start to stomach some carbs overall. And it doesn't really matter where you're at. You just have to kind of figure out that nutrition. And for me, having to do some of those pushes, it just got a little bit more difficult. So I probably got in about 350-ish, I would say. And give or take, I don't know how much splashed out, but it doesn't take a lot of splashing to cover yourself in sticky carb drink. So I felt like I got in a fairly decent amount there, more on the low end, but I figured, okay, just make yourself feel good to get off the bike as much as you can. And after that second loop, I was like, let's run a marathon. Let's go. But the far side of the turnaround, so where now I led up, so Menno did his kind of push. I'm trying to take in my carbs, but we're pushing fairly hard there. I do my push up the hill to the turnaround and then, keep trying to take in my nutrition and just know at that point, because we got like 40 minutes left, I'm like, I'm probably not going to down all of this. I don't want to feel sick. I would rather go a little less calories because you can kind of bring yourself back a little bit with Coke and caffeine. And I had 2 flasks waiting for me on the run. So I wasn't going to force anything, and also knew, okay, Menno and I will trade a little bit, but I can kind of, once you get back to that final turn before you're making lots of turns into town, most likely gaps won't come down anymore because you're going pretty fast. There's a lot of age groupers on the course, and you can kind of try and spin yourself out a little bit to feel better for the marathon. Because that last lap, I was starting to think, man, marathon's a long way. I was pretty psyched to go run, but now I'm not as psyched. I'm just not as excited to go run 3 loops of this run course. It sounds like a lot. And overall, I'd say, like, even weather-wise, like, it wasn't super hot, so everything was going, I'd say, really fairly well. And this, not unusual. Like, your stomach will come back and forth throughout an Ironman, and that's just part of the game. And since I didn't do as much Ironman training, I'm wondering maybe if my gut was not as trained as it could have been, because I did a fairly good job in Marbella taking in nutrition, but that's only for a half, even though it's higher intensity. So that is one area that I do need to improve on, is just the execution of my nutrition. I feel like I've got a really good nutrition plan and have practiced it in training to an extent, but really have to get stuff dialed, especially for when it gets hot out, because that's when it gets much more difficult to digest. So that's all to say, I had to, just adjust a little bit, try and take things on the fly, which is what you got to do. Ironman is all about being calm and being able to, solve problems as you go. It gets a lot harder when you have less carbs and you get carb brain and you're like, what is going on? But then Menno, we take that final turn off and he's leading, and he just kind of, I noticed it was taking more effort and concentration to just hold his wheel, and was surging, and then I'd slow down and surge. And you're going around age groupers kind of for the second 2 laps as well, where you might not see any for a while, or there'll be single file, but then you'll just get where it groups up and there's some narrow sections and stuff like that. So it just started to take kind of extra for me to hold on to his wheel, and we were pretty much there. I'm like, okay, just if he slowly pulls away just a little bit, you can get it through transition, get yourself to feel pretty good, take in as much nutrition as you can, and just, get to the run and feel as good as possible for the first half marathon and see what you can do the second. I had goals and feeling like I could run a 2:35 overall. I mean, we were pretty close to my previous, like my swim time. We were 48 minutes out, and the time before we were 47:30. That's that slow swimming at the beginning. I don't think we really pushed as hard in the swim as we could have, but relatively close. Then the bike, rode 4:01:30-ish. Before, I had said I rode about 4:12, so I was about 10, 11 minutes faster on the bike overall. And if I look back, like, I know I averaged right around 285 to 290 or so for the bike 3 years ago. This time I averaged like 295, 300. So my aerodynamics, the speed that I'm holding is much better for the power. That's great to see. I would like that 300 to feel a little bit easier overall, but I'm being picky. I came out at the front of the race, was in transition with Menno, passed off my bike, no problem. He came in about 15 seconds ahead of me. I was okay. I tried to take in what nutrition I could, get down, asked the, guys in transition in there, asked if I need anything. I was like, I need some water. Like, I got to get something going here. And then, Menno was like, great ride. Let's go finish this. I'm like, yeah, bro, let's go. He took off about 10, 15 seconds ahead of me again. I kind of got myself situated with my hat, glasses, race belt, had my 2 flasks with my Good Life nutrition in there, and started out. And I like to sip that nutrition, kind of every mile before the aid stations. And I went out at a pace that I thought was like pretty steady, and would look down at my watch and see anywhere from like 5:45 pace to 5:55, and wasn't making any headway on Menno. So I'm like, okay, I'm going out essentially 2:30 marathon pace, 2:32 marathon pace at those paces, 2:35 the slowest. I'm like, well, I just have to stick here. It's not often guys, especially on this course, run 2:30. So just stay steady. We'll see if he comes back. If not, that's kind of what I did my first time here too, and what I did in Roth. Just run your pace for the first half of the race at least, and then you can really start to race it when everybody gets super tired and worn out. In those first few miles, like, I could just I settled in, and, the paces weren't as fast as I necessarily wanted. You got to work out some of the kinks coming off the bike. the legs, like my quads were just absolutely wrecked after that bike from us pushing. And it just felt like my form wasn't as relaxed as maybe I wanted it. It didn't feel bad, but it didn't feel fantastic. Did not really feel like the Marbella run, which is funny because my bike felt pretty off in Marbella and it felt great in Ironman Arizona. I had a great ride, and then it kind of switched. The run in Marbella felt awesome. The run in Ironman Arizona did not, and I will get way more into why it did not as we go on. So this first lap going, and I hear Sam is still 4 minutes back, had Salvesberg about 2. They're running a bit quicker than me after the first 2-3 miles. I'm like, okay, well, everybody, when people yell at you, they're running fast, you got to find 10 seconds a mile or 5 seconds or whatever it is. I'm like, I'm going to run how I'm going to run at this moment for right now, because we're all spread out. If I'm not feeling fantastic, if I was feeling really good, I might be like, okay, let's take a risk. I want to go catch Menno. I'm not going to worry about those guys, but I also know it's a 3-lap run. It starts to really hurt that second half, so I'm going to just have to run my pace. Like, it wasn't like I was running super slow either, because in my previous Ironmans this year, I know from looking back, but I would start the run and would just be awful. Texas, I was so tight. I just couldn't handle it, and like I was almost crampy in the back as I was going through. The run in Frankfurt, I started off and it was not super fast, but then I totally body just was like shutting down, just couldn't really move well at all. At least I was moving well here. Like, okay, maybe I wasn't averaging super fast or as fast as I wanted, but I was still in that 240-ish range, especially through those first few miles. And okay, that's a solid marathon. Like, I would take that. Like, if you would have told me that, I would be like, okay, that would be solid. I'll take that marathon from the year that I had. So I just kept picking my way through the whole front lap and was taking in my nutrition, stayed on top of it, taking in water. And I think it got to about mile 8 at that aid station where stomach wasn't handling things well, and I just was feeling tight and was not really flowing super well. And I was like, shit, I've got 2/3 of a marathon to go. I was running really pretty well for those first few miles, and now I'm just not handling it super well. So I need to figure something else out. I need to change something. I finished off most of that first flask of nutrition. Like, I have a decent amount. It's 40 minutes into the run. Those 2 flasks had 75 grams of carbs plus 75 milligrams of caffeine. I got in at least 60 of those or something like that. I should be good for an hour. If you don't need as much on here, let's switch to water, and maybe you can try some Coke in a little bit. Have this other flask as backup. You can start taking it if you feel better, and let's just change it up. Got to try something. But in the back of my mind too, it was that first 8 miles was not that fun overall, because I knew people were coming. I was not flowing as well as I wanted, and it was just hard. It's hard to run a marathon. It's hard to know that you still have 16 miles to go or 18 miles to go at that point, 17, 18, it's just way farther than a half marathon. You're not halfway yet. It's hard mentally, and I had to keep pulling myself back into the moment. Okay, what can I do? I'm changing things up. Let's focus on the aid stations. It's hard sometimes at the aid stations to get everything you want. Like, sometimes the volunteers only hand you 1 cup of water because that's what they expect you to take, when really I want like 7. And I just really tried to focus on that. It was amazing seeing my family out there and friends, because they were all kind of in one spot. There was a sign that my niece had made for me that she was holding with my daughter. And it was just, that was energizing. That first time coming through, though, I think they could probably tell that I was struggling. Sam was not too far behind, and shortly after I saw my family, he passed by me like I was standing still. And I just thought to myself, because I knew that he was going well from Nice, so I was like, he's going for the win, probably. Like, he's taking the risk now. And I had no response at that point. And I was like, just keep plugging away. I knew that Salvesberg apparently had tried to run with him, I think. And he wasn't there anymore. And I'm like, okay, let's just reset. Let's go through some aid stations. Let's see if he can take a peek, because there was a little 180 up a hill that I could kind of peek back and see how far Salvesberg was. And I saw that I still had some time at that point and was going to, go, okay, he's not running as fast as Sam, so I still have maybe a shot. And at this point now I'm in 3rd place. Menno was on fire. He runs a 2:35, goes 7:38. Nobody was touching him that day. Had an amazing run. That's about as fast as you can get on that course. Like, you're not taking off much time. Really, in any course can you take off much time from that Ironman. But so he's kind of out. Nobody's catching him that day. Sam in second, he pretty quickly puts a minute to the furthest gap I heard was 2.5 minutes to Sam, or 2:36. That's a little bit later in the marathon, so I'll kind of backtrack, but I'm running. Now we're going, maybe this is we're a few miles into that lap. I'm starting to get around mile 11, 12, 10 or 11 even. And I hear Salvesberg is coming. This is coming off of the dirt section. I'm not moving super fast. I can see my time. I was around 6:10 pace, 6:15, crept up to 6:20, 6:30. I saw 7-minute pace at one point, and it all starts playing through your mind of Frankfurt and Texas and how you slog through those runs. Third place, second, you're a little safe. First, you're golden. Like, you got your Kona slot, you're winning, you got momentum. Second, you were fighting for first, but you're kind of safe. You got one buffer to the Kona slot, and you might have a little bit more of a gap. When you're in third, you're in the danger zone. You're on the edge of losing that Kona slot. I had a long way to go in the marathon, and this is where kind of the first part of running through hell happened for me, because it's hard. It all kind of melts together, but I just know this section from when Sam passed me until Salvesberg caught me about mile 12, I went through it. Like, it took me a while to find my stride. I felt like things were tightening. I was running more frontal chain with my quads. Your mind starts to play games because you're on your own and there's nothing else to focus on. And those previous bad races, I guess if you have one bad race, you have more good races to draw from. When I have 2 bad Ironmans in a row where the run is where I really crumbled, that starts at actually 3 Ironmans in a row, because Kona, blew up on the bike a bit at some of these races, but the runs all were just not good. Could not rally, could not get my stride. Just was a real struggle to get through the marathon. Those thoughts start to creep in and keep trying to push them away, and you feel terrible. And I remember in Frankfurt, those last few miles, I've never hurt so bad in my life to run 8:30 miles. Never. I didn't want that again. And that's what almost started to happen as I was going there. And as I go through kind of this last big aid station before turning onto this bridge to cross, Salvesberg catches me. He says something nice. I guess we had heard, he just kind of said good job, or maybe if Sam was close, maybe he was hurting a bit at this point, or some people were saying that. I might be getting that confused with a little bit later in the marathon. But right as he came around, he didn't blow by me like Sam. He kind of came up and he's just running steady. And I was like, okay, I've got about 12 miles to go. I need to hold on to Salvesberg as much as possible. Just take it to the next aid station, take it to the next corner, take it to the next whatever. But just kind of commit and give it a shot, because this is it. Once you drop back to fourth, once you get past in an Ironman, it's really hard to pass back. And as I did that, I found that I loosened up. My run stride seemed to go more to my hamstrings and stuff, and I was able to stick on his feet. And then I was able, after a few hundred meters, I kind of ran side by side. And I was like, hey, we could kind of keep pushing the pace a little. This feels pretty good. Let's run side by side. Let's see if we can go. And I almost half stepped him a little bit. We ran through an aid station, and I just kind of slowly pulled away around the half marathon point. Kind of checked. I went through in 121-ish, 121-ish. And I kind of slowly pulled away. And this was kind of my favorite part of the course, even because there's hills, it breaks it up. You get a little bit change of scenery. It's not a long out and back. You're not running on dirt. And so I was able to kind of power through, and I held that momentum. And I was like, okay, hey, we're racing again. I had a little bit of this uplifting moment of, oh, this could be fun now. Maybe I could catch Sam. I don't know. I'm feeling better, running way better than when Sam got me. I thought I was going to be running, 7-minute pace, 7:38 minute, going backwards. And now I got a little life breathed back into me. I was taking water and Coke at this point, and I was like, if it ain't broke, don't fix it at this point. Let's keep going. And I'm running, I'm going, and I hear Colin Suk is like 2 minutes back after I run a few miles like this. And this is the way back. It's a long straight. And I was like, you gotta be shitting me. Like, I got another guy. Like, I'm in third. Like, I was riding high. I was like, oh, man, this is good. Like, usually if people catch you, like, you're gone. So I was riding that, and then I heard Colin's coming. I'm like, okay, well, I'm running better now. Maybe I can hold it for a while, leave it till late, and he'll cash his chips in. And I heard Sam, like, rumors of people yelling, like, Sam isn't looking as good. I was like, okay, well, he was 2:30 ahead or something. And I'm like, that's, still doable. Let's give myself, like, once you hit like 10 miles to go too, which is about what I was coming up on this. I'm like, then you got to kind of, you get your chance. That's the last part of the marathon, arguably the hardest part, most fatigue. I'm strong. I can handle this. And Rudy Von Berg was out there cheering on his girlfriend, and he was giving splits too. And it wasn't long after I had heard Colin Suk was 2 minutes back to then Rudy said he was 50 and Sam was 2:36. And that was kind of deflating for me, if I'm being honest. Like, that was where I was like, shit. And I didn't feel as good at that point. I was still trying to chase down maybe Sam a little bit, got to the out, and then I started, and I was just locking up a little bit, and I kind of was going through it again. Like, it was hard. I don't know if I was necessarily, I wasn't necessarily bonking. I don't feel like I really was running out of energy necessarily, so I don't feel like I'm that far off with my nutrition, but I do feel like muscularly, like I was just suffering. Like, my hips and my quads, like, it just like hurt to run. And I tried to pull at a 180. I knew I could kind of see Colin. I was like, just go for a little bit. And on the dirt section, I looked down at my watch. I'm running like 5:55 pace. I'm like, bury him. Just don't let him catch you. Don't let him get that momentum. Because it was in Augusta, the last race I did before Marbella, and this is he caught me and I could not respond, and he beat me. And I was like, not this guy again. Like, I got to go, and I'm going to have to race him. And last time he got the better of me. And so after a couple more miles, I'm coming to that same bridge that Salvesberg had caught me on. And just before that, Colin catches me at that last aid station. He kind of goes through ahead of me. I try and take in a whole bunch of water, some Coke, some more water, splash stuff on me, revive me, and just go, here we go again. Hold on to him just a little bit, because at this point, we're getting down to the final like 5-6 miles of the marathon. We've hit about mile 20, 21, somewhere in there, and maybe a little less, but we're right there. I'm like, every single mile you can hang on to will be good. And I actually, when he caught me, he said, is Sam not doing it? Like, let's go. Like, I think Sam's hurting, like something along those lines. And mind you, I'm dead silent during all of this. I had zero energy, sympathy, empathy, whatever it was to be communicating with people. These guys were great sports, and I was just in a total world of pain at this point, and in a mental battle where I couldn't spare any extra effort to communicate with anybody else. In my mind, I'm like, dude, I'm just trying to handle you right now. Like, I can't think about anybody. And we had heard that Sam was 2:15. Somebody yelled at me, Sam is walking. I'm like, really? I'm like, okay, that's good for us. Like, maybe he put in too hard of an effort early on. And we go across the bridge, and I could actually see Sam now, which I hadn't seen him for a while because I looked ahead, took a quick time split, and we were about a minute 30 down on him after Wright just hearing a 2:15 gap. And I was like, oh, okay, well, that's pretty good. Like, hang on to Colin. He across the bridge, as I was taking that time gap, he puts in like a couple surges on me, and I'm just thinking, just hold a little bit. It's just a little bit more. Again, my stride seemed to open up. I seemed to relax. I wasn't breathing in the same way that I was, and all I was kind of focusing on was, it's just this shoulder. It's just Colin right here. Just stay here. And after a few hundred more meters, like coming off that and running, I'm running with Colin through the aid stations again, throwing water on myself, taking some Coke, trying to get everything. Again, there's Doug Freeman and TJ Tolkson out there. They're yelling at me. Sam is running 40 seconds slower than you. He's 50 seconds up the road. I was like, oh, this is like game on. We got 5 miles to go. That's 10 seconds a mile. Let's do this. And so I kind of start just keeping that pace, like kind of ramping it up a little bit, because I'm like, now like I'm in third with Colin, and I was thinking about a sprint finish potentially of like, okay, when do I even try and distance myself on this guy who just ran me down from a few minutes down during the marathon? Like, I got to deal with him just to try and get my Kona slot to. I wonder if second place is on the table. Like, can I go up there? And I even thought to myself, like, just hang on to Colin, hang on to whoever's the better runner. You catch Sam, hey, you got a better chance at getting a top 3 here if you're all right next to each other. So I kind of started pushing, and I guess Colin had used up his energy a bit, like catching me a little bit like Salzburg. So for the second time of the day, which I am super proud of, I held off a charge for third. I was in fourth for a little bit each time, and it happened all in the quiet part of the course. It was not around other people, so I'm kind of proud of that as well. Just hung tough and was gritty and kept myself in that. And I was running a little bit scared because I knew that, well, I wasn't running scared at that point because I distanced Colin. I was taking time splits on Sam. He started to rally because people were giving him time splits, and I got maybe within 25 seconds of him because I pushed up that far hill. I'm like, this is my shot. Like, if he's hurting, the hill's going to hurt. Like, let's try and go. And maybe took out, because I heard a few 30-seconders, and I was like, oh, man, he's holding that like 25 seconds. And then I saw him book down the downhill, which was fairly steep, and I was like, oh, okay. I think he rallied a little bit. I'm still going to push, but like that looked pretty good downhill. And I'm running on the downhill, trying not to cramp in my quads, going, okay, we got 2.5 miles, 25 seconds, still 10 seconds a mile. You got to push. But I just found that part of the course so incredibly challenging because it's long. It's kind of grindy uphill. It all feels really long because it's wide open. And so I'm running to try and get second, knowing like this is as hard as I can go, and kind of feeling myself tighten up again, going through that hell a little that I was talking about for like the third time in the marathon, like after feeling good, just going back through it again. And I'm running across the bridges, and now I'm starting to almost see like, okay, where's Colin? Like now I'm running scared a little bit because people keep saying how Sam doesn't look good. You could catch him. And I'm like, the dude for the past 3 miles basically has held this gap. I have not made any headway. I don't know if this is going to happen. I'm still trying to push. I haven't given up hope, but I more want to know if I'm slowing down at all, what's Colin doing? Like if I'm running it, I got my Kona slot right now. I'm on the podium and I fought so hard for it. I do not want to lose this in the last mile. We come up onto the last mile. It's a right-hand turn and then a left-hand turn. I could still see Sam maybe 30, 45 seconds ahead of me. I think he maybe started to pull away a little bit, and I kind of make those turns. I'm really tightening up. I'm like, I just got like 6 minutes of suffering left. And I'm running down. I kind of keep looking back, half expecting Colin to make a corner because that is such a long stretch to get to the finish line. And there's a decent size uphill. But I just keep running. I don't see him anywhere. I see my dad walked out pretty far to be able to cheer. And he's like, you got this, like, you got third. It's now just about your time. And I'm thinking to myself, there's no way I could just go for a time right now. Like, I'm trying to get to the finish line because I start running probably 6:37 minute miles. I'm like, I might be running 8. I might walk at this point. I don't know how I'm going to keep it together. I feel awful. Everything hurts. My stomach could go at any moment. Like, I feel so bad. I'm like, where is Colin? Is he behind me? He's like, you're clear. I'm like, okay. I got another few hundred meters until I see my best friend Steven, and I'm like, where are they? He's like, you're clear. Like, that's how we practice, which is a Doug Freeman quote. I don't know if I've explained that yet, but that was awesome. Loved hearing that. And going up, and I could kind of turn around and see him like, okay, it's clear. And then I see Courtney, and I know I've got time for a quick kiss, so I go in for one there. Last time we did that was back in 2018. 2019 at St. Anthony's when I won that race. So that was fun to have some of that time to celebrate because Sam was long gone. Colin's long gone behind me. I get to give my daughter a high five going into the finish line. And then I got to enjoy the finish line all the way in, where then again, I just am in a world of hurt. I just wanted to lay down right there on the carpet, managed to walk a little bit, sit down at the finish line. And I posted a picture about it. You could see the life is out of me. Like, I was trying not to throw up. Everything was hurting, and I was just feeling awful. Like, I actually messaged somebody, saying I didn't see him. He's like, I was standing right next to you at the finish line, but you had no idea. I had a few people congratulate me there. I think my family was trying to get over to me, but for the next 20, 30 minutes, I was in so much pain. They were trying to ask me to go up and do the podium. I'm like, I need a minute. Even on the podium, I was kind of thinking to myself, I'm like, just don't throw up, don't throw up, don't throw up. Like, just it was probably the least enjoyable podium experience for me overall, because I just knew it was going to take me a little while to come around. And thankfully, like, my dad ran off to get my backpack to get me warm because I started shivering, and then I was just a ball of hurt, and finally was able to eventually walk, celebrate with the family. But that was basically the end there. That's my battle story. That's my war story from Ironman Arizona. It was just one of the hardest. I'm really proud of the way that I was gritty and gutsy and was able to get through that race and not give up third place, because there were so many opportunities where I could have given up, where it felt like my body gave up, and where I just kept pushing it and said, no, you got to try again. You got to try again and give it a shot to go. So that was the best way. I mean, the only better way to end the season was to have gotten second or first and, gone sub 7:30, but that's being picky. I feel like I've still got even more that I can improve on and get those times down and be more competitive, running those 7:30s again. The swim and the bike were world class, and I feel like that really validated that, hey, I am a force to be reckoned with, or I am one of the best in the world, or I am a contender when it comes to racing at the Ironman distance especially. I did not get the day perfect. It was not a perfect lead-in, but I made the most of what I had, and I nailed my goal of emptying the tank before the off season. I could not walk right for at least a few days afterwards. And the way that you did an Ironman well is by the end of the finish. When you cross that finish line, you go, I'm not doing an Iron. I don't know how I can even think about Kona. But then a few days later, you're like, nah, Kona's going to be great. Like, I'm excited for this. Like, I got a year to prepare now. I got my Kona slot. I ended the year on a podium. I went another sub 740. I was 1 minute off my time in Roth, which we all know is always a super fast course. And I do not believe Ironman Arizona is the fastest course. It is a slow course that races fairly fast. And I can go into the off season knowing, okay, the process that I'm doing is working. I have stuff to work on. It's not exactly where I want to be, but I am in the right direction, feeling good about it. And I got that Kona slot locked up, so I do not have to be worrying about that for the next year, which just feels really good and can build out kind of my perfect season for the goals that I want to accomplish. So I'm starting to get a little long here. I could keep talking about this, honestly, because it was like so many different little stories in there. I know different little stories surrounding the race, but really wanted to kind of give you the perspective of how was I talking myself through that race when after the second lap of the bike, it started to get real, and it was not, feeling as good. I went from in the swim and the first lap of the bike feeling like high on life. Yeah, this is Ironman. I'm going to win everything. This is going to be super easy, like knowing that it's going to get harder, but I'm going to handle it, and it's going to be great, to fighting for my life, essentially, like fighting for third place and burying myself to try and do that and just run, 7-minute pace by the end of the run. So that's my Ironman Arizona story. Thanks for following along. It's been a crazy couple weeks traveling to Spain and back, and being able to go from a disappointing race to one that I'm super proud of. And not that I'm not proud of Marbella, because I'm proud of certain sections of that race for sure, but just being able to put together a much more complete race at the end of the year just was awesome to have after everything that had happened. So, and how just the season that I've had, going through a lot of like poor racing, feeling like I wasn't anywhere near myself, and feeling kind of lost after Frankfurt. Mentioned in the post, just sitting on that step, basically crying, holding back tears, just, wondering what I was doing. And I was all alone in Frankfurt. Then to end the season surrounded by family, executing exactly how I wanted. That was just a great way to end the season. So thanks again for listening. Got more stuff planned for this. So see you again next week. We'll keep it consistent. Thanks, everyone.